Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program. The Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program is a 30-minute radio intervention support program that is meant to provide continuous instruction to keep you academically engaged during this stay-at-home period, as well as preparing you, our 6th, 9th, and 12th graders for the pending Liberia Primary School Certificate Exam, Liberia Junior High School Certificate Exam, and West Africa Senior Secondary Certificate Exam when the time comes. Also, in addition to this academic support, the program is meant to provide psychosocial support for learners, teachers, and parents, and also tips on how you as parents and teachers can provide support to your students and children at home. Now, let's join our teacher for today's lesson.
Hello learners, parents and teachers. Welcome back to the Ministry of Education and Partners Coronavirus COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program. I am Linda Y. Dean, your radio teacher for this lesson, and this is a Rising in You movement presentation. Our lesson for today is for grades 8 and 9. The subject is Social Studies, and the topic is From the Abolition of Slavery to the End of the Colonial Period. In our last lesson, we discussed Liberia before 1822, and for today's lesson, we will discuss From the Abolition of Slavery to the End of the Colonial Period. Please take your pencil and pen and copybook and get ready for today's lesson. Now, our learning objectives for today's lesson are 1. To be able to discuss the reasons for which the United States government and the American Colonization Society founded Liberia, and 2. Discuss the establishment of other colonies on the Grain Coast by colonization societies in Liberia. Our key words for today are 1. Colonization, 2. Colonists, 3. Civilization, 4. Rebellion, 5. Economic, 6. Voyage, 7. Pioneer, 8. Pioneers, and 9. Abolitionists. Again, colonization, colonists, civilization, rebellion, economic, voyage, pioneer, pioneers, abolitionists. The founding of Liberia owes much to the problem created by slavery in Liberia. Many persons spoke strongly against slavery because they feared it violated the laws of God. Other Americans opposed slavery on the grounds that it deprived a person of his human dignity. All those who opposed slavery and worked toward setting Africans free were called abolitionists. When the United States government forbade the importation of slaves in 1808, many Africans had gained their freedom either by escaping, working extra hard to pay for it, or through the will of their masters. The freed slaves presented 3 serious problems to the American society. Firstly, slave owners were troubled that as long as Africans who were free remained in America, those of them who were still slaves would become more stubborn and rebellious. Secondly, some Africans believed very strongly that Africans or black people as a whole were inferior to white people, and as such, the two races should not live together lest the black race contaminate the white race. Thirdly, the most critical problem presented by slavery in America was the frequent rebellions by slaves and freed slaves. 3 of the notable uprisings were the Cattle Rebellion of 1740, the Denmark-Vesey Rebellion of 1822, and the Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831. The Cattle Rebellion took place in Charleston, South Carolina, and was led by a slave named Cato. The insurrection instilled great fear in the minds of plantation owners. In 1822, a black man named Denmark Vesey led another rebellion in Charleston, South Carolina. Like the Cattle Rebellion, this uprising took many lives and caused South Carolina to pass more stringent laws to govern the movements and actions of slaves and free men. Another insurrection, the Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831 in Cross Keys, Virginia, terrified even those who were not slave owners. As a result of these uprisings, some states passed laws that forbade all blacks to learn how to read and write, go to church, move in groups, or assemble for any purpose whatsoever. Whether slavery was opposed by those who thought the practice was against the laws of God or believed it was degrading, nearly all the abolitionists concluded that the best solution to the problem was to remove freed slaves from America and relocate them, preferably in Africa. Africa was an overwhelming choice for many reasons. It was generally believed then in Europe and America that black people as a whole were inferior in that they had no religion, that is, Western Christianity and civilization, which meant Western civilization. For American religious groups, the freed slaves would take religion and civilization to Africa. Lastly, for their choice of Africa, that freed slaves would help to build the first modern state on the continent for black people, particularly blacks from America. This is why freed slaves who arrived in the 19th century are called pioneers. A pioneer is also someone who goes ahead to prepare a place before others follow later to settle there. One of those who labored for freed slaves to return to the land of their forefathers was Paul Coffey. He was born to a black man and an Indian woman in Massachusetts on January 7, 1757. Coffey became a successful sea merchant, and in 1815, he transported to Sierra Leone at his own expense 38 freed slaves. He later turned over to the American Colonization Society his own plans for resettling freed slaves to Africa. On December 28, 1816, there was formed in Washington, D.C., an organization for the purpose of relocating freed slaves of the United States. It was called the American Colonization Society, the ACS. The leading founders include Robert Finley, whose brother Josiah P.C. Finley was the first governor of Mississippi in Africa, as Sano County was called between 1836 and 1842. Actually, the driving force behind the creation of the ACS was Robert Finley. Also, Bushrod Washington, the first president of the society, and Elijah Caldwell, the first general of the association. These are the leading founders of the ACS. The settlement of Caldwell in Monterey County is named in memory of Elijah Caldwell. On November 5, 1817, Samuel John Mills was appointed by the ACS to come and purchase land in Africa for colonization. Mills in turn selected Ebenezer Burgess as traveling companion. The two left from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on November 16 via England. They passed through England for the purpose of seeking British permission to resettle freed slaves in Sierra Leone. As it was then, Sierra Leone had been established for those American slaves and freed slaves who had fought on the side of England in the American War of Independence. Mills and Burgess finally went to Sierra Leone, but unfortunately, the colonial government under Governor Charles McCarthy, that is, the colonial government under Governor Charles McCarthy, rejected their request. In the opinion of the governor, any colony nearby would certainly reduce Sierra Leone's volume of trade. That is, an American colony could successfully compete with Sierra Leone in the African trade. Mills and Burgess accordingly left and went to Sherbro Island. Sherbro Island at that time consisted of more than one state. A few kings on the island were Somano, Safa, and Sherbro. Mills and Burgess were given great help by an African named John Kizell. Kizell was a native of Sherbro and son of a town chief. As a boy, he had been kidnapped and sold into slavery, and he finally ended up in Charleston, South Carolina. When British soldiers invaded Charleston during the American Revolution, Kizell chose to fight for the British. In this way, he and many black people regained their freedom. John Kizell gave Mills and Burgess much assistance, including food and shelter. He even arranged for them to meet with the African rulers on the island. In the end, King Sherbro and his colleague agreed to sell land to the Americans, but not at the very moment. They promised to do so only after Mills and Burgess had returned from America with the settlers, and above all, after the people had agreed to the sale of land. With great satisfaction, Mills and Burgess took a copy of the agreement to America. Unfortunately, Mills never lived to tell the story. He died en route and was buried at sea. But from the report that Burgess made, the ACS became more hopeful that the dream of establishing a colony in Africa would one day come true. Millsburg in Monserrado County is named in memory of Samuel John Mills and Ebenezer Burgess. I want you to listen carefully as I continue with our lesson. Now let's begin with the discussion on the voyage Elizabeth. In early 1820, the ACS and the American government decided to send the first group of settlers to Africa. The group sailed on the ship Elizabeth, which is commonly known as the Mayflower of Liberian history. The Elizabeth left New York Harbor on February 6, 1820, and arrived in Freetown on March 9. On board were 86 men, women, and children from the following states: New York 40, Pennsylvania 33, Virginia 9, Maryland 2, and District of Columbia 2. It should be made clear here that, as far as the United States government was concerned, the settlers on the Elizabeth were not going to build a modern state in Africa or civilize Africans. Rather, they were employees of the American government sent to prepare a camp where freed slaves from America and slaves seized on the high seas would settle for a while before the recaptured slaves would go to where they believed to have been captured. Also on the Elizabeth were Agent Samuel Bacon and his assistant John P. Bankson, representatives of the U.S. government. The ACS was represented by Samuel A. Crozier, who also served as physician for the crew. Crozierville in Monserrado County is named in memory of Samuel A. Crozier. After a week's stay in Freetown, the settlers moved to Sherbro Island, where they arrived on March 20. In the end, Sherbro Island turned out to be a nightmare. Malaria killed all the agents and nearly half of the colonists. What is also significant about the venture is that John Kizell and Daniel Coker, one of the leading colonists, became bitter enemies. On his deathbed, Crozier appointed Daniel Coker temporary agent, but the majority of the settlers was expecting Crozier to appoint John Kizell as his successor. Within a short time, Kizell withdrew his support, and thus the effort by the ACS and American government to establish a settlement near Sierra Leone came to an unsuccessful end. Class, in 1822, relief was sent to the settlers. The ACS sent agent Joseph Andrews and his assistant Christian Woodberger. The American government sent as its agent Ephraim Bacon, the brother of Samuel Bacon. Ephraim Bacon's assistant was Jonathan B. Wynn. The group, which included 33 settlers, sailed on the Nautilus. It left on January 23rd and anchored in Freetown on March 8. After 2 weeks in Sierra Leone, Andrews and Bacon left Wynn and Warburger in charge on Cherbourg Island and sailed farther southeast in a general direction of present-day Liberia. You are listening to the Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program, and our subject for today is Social Studies with the topic From the Abolition of Slavery to the End of the Colonial Period. This is Lesson 3 for grades 8 and 9, and I am your teacher, Linda Y. Dean. And more of these lessons can be heard on the following radio stations: Truth FM 96.1, ELBC 99.9, ECOWAS 91.5, Cool FM 91.9, Freedom FM 87.9, Elam 98.7, OK FM 99.9, Heart FM 107.9, including other community radio stations across the country. Welcome back, students, and please keep safe. Coronavirus is real. We are going to discuss from Cherbourg Island to Bassa and Duka as our last subtopic for today. Upon leaving Cherbourg Island on March 22nd, Joseph Andrews and Samuel Bacon reached Bassa on April 1st and requested a meeting with the king, Jack Ben. The meeting was arranged by Bottle Beer, a crew who lived in Bassa. After almost 2 weeks of closed-door conference between King Jack Ben and the Americans, an open meeting was called at which the king and his people consented to lease or sell land to America for the bacon. An agreement was written and a copy was forwarded to America for the ACS approval, but the ACS rejected it on July 13. 2 reasons helped to explain the ACS rejection of the agreement. Firstly, the Bassa made it clear to the Americans that settlement to be built must in no way interfere with the slave trade in their country. And secondly, the Bassa may have charged a very high fee as rent of their land. While Andrews and Bacon were in Bassa, the settlers were safely removed to Fura Bay near Freetown. This was done by Captain Robert Field Stockton of the United States battleship, the Alligator. Stockton Creek, near Monrovia, is named in memory of Captain Stockton. Students, late in 1821, Eli Aries, a surgeon in the U.S. Navy, was sent with additional supplies for the settlers. Aries sailed to Cape Mesurado or Duka, where he arrived on December 11. Negotiation for the land started on the 12th. This was the beginning of the first Duka conference, which lasted for only a few days. Secret meetings between the Americans and the Africans ended on December 15. On this day, a contract called the Ducal Contract was signed for a piece of land that started the country we call today the Republic of Liberia. After paying about $300 worth of goods, Aries and Stockton promised in the Ducal Contract to pay the remainder at a later date, which they might not have done. The African kings who placed their marks on the Ducal Contract were as follows. King Kainda of Gola, who is known in Liberian history as Zoda. His seat of government was called Southtown or Bissau and is located between Monrovia and Bomi Hills, not too far from the town of Clay. King Long Peter, another Gola ruler, whose capital was Malima Gobla. The village is near the former Guthrie rubber plantation. King Peter, a Day ruler whose African name was Kai. His town kingdom was situated near Stockton Creek. King Jimmy, probably a Day, whose village state was located to the south of the St. Paul River, not far from Monrovia, and the Day King Ba Gorgo, who is known in Liberian history as George. Gorgo's kingdom included Cape Monserrado, Old Crew Town, and some parts of Sincor and Congo Town. Those who witnessed the sale of the land were John S. Mills and John Craig. Upon the conclusion of the Ducal Contract, Aries returned to Sierra Leone for the settlers. He arrived back in Ducal and landed on Dozwa Island on January 7, 1822. This is how January 7 became the holiday known as Pioneers' Day. Dozwa was first renamed Perseverance to indicate that the settlers had been firm in their determination to find a new home, despite all the setbacks. The Perseverance was later changed to Providence to show that Dozwa was a special gift of God. Pioneers' Day was abolished by the People's Redemption Council in 1980. The pioneers did not find it easy to take possession of their land. While Aries was in Sierra Leone, King Peter of Bushrod Island in particular was charged by his people with unlawfully giving land to foreigners. The Africans were saying that according to their customary laws, no one, not even a king, had a right to sell the land which belonged to the entire community. Another conference had to be called to resolve the issue. This was the second Ducal Conference. In the end, the conference decided in favor of the settlers. The pioneers were able to remain at Ducal for two main reasons. First, there was an American man of war nearby when the conference was in session, and those who were opposed to the colonists were concerned that the battleship would shell their towns and villages if they continued to insist that the settlers leave. Another reason was that not all the kings were against the pioneers. Kings such as Ba Kaya and Tom were strong supporters. Africans who supported the colonists were headed by King Sao Boso of the Kamara clan, whose kingdom was called Kondo. Boso made it clear that if the colonists were not allowed to settle on the land that they had already purchased, he and other friendly kings would combine their forces and go to war in support of the pioneers. Bozo was of Mandingo origin. His father, Kwalifi Kamara, came from present-day Republic of Guinea. He was a clever and brave military leader. After founding his own town of Kotokweli, he gradually annexed other towns, including Bopolu, which he made his seat of government. At the end of the Second Ducal Conference, Aries returned to Sierra Leone for the rest of the settlers, leaving the colonist Frederick James in charge. Many came back with Aries, but some, including Daniel Coker, chose to remain in Sierra Leone. After 4 months on Providence Island, during which time houses were built on Cape Mesurado. The settlers moved to mainland on April 25th under the leadership of Frederick James. Well, students, before you pick up your copybook and pen to write down your homework assignment, let's review our lesson for today. It was earlier stated that the founding of Liberia owes much to the problem created by slavery in America. Many persons spoke strongly against slavery because they feared it violated the laws of God. When the United States government forbade the importation of slaves in 1808, many Africans had gained their freedom either by escaping, working extra hard to pay for it, or through the will of their masters. The freed slaves presented three serious problems to the American society. Africa was an overwhelming choice for many reasons. It was generally believed then in Europe and America that black people as a whole were inferior and that they had no religion, that is Western Christianity and civilization, which meant Western civilization. One of those who labored for freed slaves to return to the land of their forefathers was Paul Coffey. He transported to Sierra Leone at his own expense 38 freed slaves. He later turned over to the American Colonization Society his own plans for resettling freed slaves to Africa. On December 28, 1816, there was formed in Washington, D.C., an organization for the purpose of relocating freed slaves of the United States. It was called the American Colonization Society, the ACS. Mills and Burgess were given great help by an African named John Kizell. Kizell was a native of Sherbrooke and son of a town chief. In early 1820, the ACS and the American government decided to send the first group of settlers to Africa. The group sailed on the ship Elizabeth, which is commonly known as the Mayflower of Liberian history. Negotiation for the land started on the 12th. This was the beginning of the first Ducal Conference, which lasted for only a few days. Africans who supported the colonists were headed by King Saoboso of the Kamara clan, whose kingdom was called Kondo. Now students, please pick up your copybook and pencil and pen to write down your homework assignment. Question number 1. Explain 2 reasons why some Americans were opposed to slavery. Question number 2. What were the 2 main reasons why the ACS was founded? Question number 3. Name 3 of the rebellions staged by slaves and freed slaves in America. Question number 4. Why is the Elizabeth important in Liberian history? Question number 5. Who were King Jack Ben and Bottle Beer? Question number 6. Name the African kings who signed the Ducal contract. Thank you, students, for your participation in today's lessons. Our next lesson will focus on the colony of Liberia from 1822 to 1839. Just before I leave you, please take note of key historical timeline of Liberia. Charles G. Taylor in exile, 2003, August. Nigerian peacekeepers arrive. Charles Taylor leaves Liberia after handing power to his deputy Moses Blah. U.S. troops arrive. Interim government and rebels sign peace accord. Judy Bryant chosen to head interim administration. Rebels hand in their weapons. 2003 September to October. U.S. forces pull out. UN launches major peacekeeping mission, deploying thousands of troops. 2004 October. Riots in Monrovia leave 16 people dead. The UN says former combatants were behind the violence. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf elected. 2005 23 November. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf becomes the first woman to be elected as an African head of state. 2006 February. Truth and Reconciliation Commission is set up to investigate human rights abuses between 1979 and 2003. 2006 April. Former President Charles Taylor appears before a UN-backed court in Sierra Leone on charges of crimes against humanity. In June, the Netherlands-based International Criminal Court agrees to host his trial. 2006 June, UN Security Council eases a ban on weapons sales so Liberia can arm newly trained security forces. An embargo on Liberian timber exports is lifted shortly afterwards. 2006 July, President Johnson Sirleaf switches on generator-powered streetlights in the capital, which has been without electricity for 15 years. 2007 April, UN Security Council lifts its ban on Liberian diamond exports. The ban was imposed in 2001 to stem the flow of blood diamonds, which helped to fund the Civil War. 2007 May, UN urges Liberia to outlaw trial by ordeal. Charles G. Taylor, former president, on trial. 2007 June, start of Charles Taylor's war crimes trial in The Hague, where he stands accused of instigating atrocities in Sierra Leone. 2008 January, Supreme Court rules that the president can appoint local mayors because the government cannot afford to hold municipal elections. Municipal elections have not been held since 1985 because of financial constraints and successive civil wars. 2008 February, U.S. President George W. Bush ends a 5-country tour of Africa with a visit to Liberia, one of America's staunchest allies on the continent. 2008 March, Liberia conducts its first census since 1984. 2009 February, President Johnson Sirleaf admits to Truth and Reconciliation Commission that she mistakenly backed ex-President Charles Taylor when he launched the 14-year Civil War in 1989. 2009 July, Truth Commission submits report to Parliament, recommends prosecuting 200 people and listing others who should be barred from public office, including President Johnson Sirleaf. 2009 September, UN Security Council votes to extend mandate of UN forces in Liberia, UNMIL, into 2010 to help with 2011 elections. Well, class, that's it for our lesson today. If you have any questions or need clarification on today's lesson, please text them to the following numbers: 0880-618-261, 0770-741-3015. I have been your teacher, Linda Y. Dean. Goodbye. Amen.